West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Also in the report, another former Trump staffer found out in advance that there would be a call to action to march to the Capitol and, as he put it, make noise. This was at a time when Trump's team was telling the authorities the exact opposite. The crowd would be at the ellipse only. So the report states that staffer's text is the earliest indication they found. Let me repeat. You're looking at a really important page from this report. That text I just read you is the earliest indication that Donald Trump did plan to wage his supporters in a call to arms to march on the Capitol. Now that's incriminating. Remember, if all you want to do is hold a rally or a protest, you could do it any number of places in Washington. And when you pick a place like the Ellipse and make that the place and do the security for that, well, you put all your chips down there. When you have a secret plan to go to the Capitol, any prosecutor looks at that and says, if you were just going to gather outside peacefully, why keep it a secret? You could have publicized that for weeks. Make sure everybody knows where they're going. No, it is incriminating. And then you add the other evidence in the report. The FBI found an online post that said it's not a rally. It's a final stand with people ready to die. Don't be surprised if we take the Capitol building. You'll note the document is not fully released because of security concerns. These are pieces of evidence that can help prosecutors prove intent, which is a required element for every crime that Congressman Raskin cited in that referral.
The fourth and final statute, anyone who incites, assists, or engages in insurrection against the United States of America, and anyone who gives aid or comfort to an insurrection.
Aid or comfort to an insurrection. Translation: you don't have to necessarily prove that someone was proactively planning this for months, but you do need to prove that they intended, in a very legal sense, to aid, comfort, or otherwise support the actual insurrection. It is a high bar, but there's a lot of evidence that is being built up for that bar. Now, when do these conspiracies begin? I'll tell you, the committee's evidence makes a strong case that they long predate the January 6th period or the couple days run-up or even the announcement of a January 6th rally. That's bad for Trump, again, if it shows a long-standing plot by hook or by crook or with a team of crooks to steal the election. This is also different than the public understanding. Remember the morning of January 6th, 2021. Outside of Trump's circle, people didn't view that day as the dangerous culmination of a looming criminal plot. Intelligence services largely didn't. The Capitol Police obviously did not. The National Guard, in the main, didn't view it that way. Even Trump's most ardent critics didn't wake up that day bracing for the nature of the very sophisticated and effective attack that did delay the certification, because of the reasons I just told you that this report documents in far more voluminous detail than we had. This stuff was secret. Even at the end of that terrible day, people didn't know what's in the new report, now revealed that the plots extended after the attack. Trump tried to join the crime in progress, kept his motorcade on hand in case he couldn't go later. And that's, again, according to his own staff and protectors. His driver and a Secret Service agent testifying under oath that within 30 seconds of getting to the vehicle after the ellipse speech, the president asked if he could go to the Capitol. And remember, presidents are ordering people when they tell subordinates what they want. The motorcade didn't even disband on arriving at the White House as usual, the report noting instead the motorcade was instructed to stand by in case the move to the Capitol happened. So, in plain English, Trump tried to join the crime in progress, broke protocol to keep the option open because he still wanted to go back to the literal crime scene. And then if that wasn't enough, after the attack and the violence, the report details that while Trump watched the carnage on TV at the White House and then finally was pushed into telling the rioters to go home, he and Giuliani continued to seek to delay the joint session of Congress. I told you I had highlights for you. That's a huge one. Think about that. Donald Trump and his lead election attorney were still trying to enact one of the planks of the coup plot to delay and sabotage the certification, to create the kind of chaos that they thought could help them hold on to power after the attack. Continuing the plot after the violent attack is some of the hardest evidence available that the attack was part of the plot. Now, I said that in a legal way. Here's a different way to say it. If you go to do something and it gets out of hand, right? You go to drive to the supermarket, but you hit someone in the car by accident, and the prosecutors are looking at that and saying, did you murder someone with your car? Did you have an accident? What you do after the accident can be very compelling for the evidence. Do you call the authorities? Do you administer help? Are you worried about this because it wasn't your goal? Or conversely, do you continue to do the thing that makes it look like that accident wasn't an accident, that you intended to harm someone? For example, you got back in your car and tried to hit someone again. They were continuing to try to sabotage the certification after the day of the 6th. That's in the report, and that's one of the crimes that's recommended for referral. All of this unseen and unknown to the general public, the committee emphasizes, and that element of surprise was key because the report notes it might have worked. If enough state officials had gone along, it might have worked. You see it right there. That was the coup plan. Steal the election, even potentially without a physical attack. So the Trump team did think they had to have some level of extreme action, whether you call that rushing the Capitol or threatening Mike Pence, which the president, of course, did in public, or surrounding it in a way to obstruct or delay the certification. That itself, again, is a crime, even if you don't charge them on insurrection. Now, if you're thinking that these other, say, non-violent crimes or bloodless coup parts are not what's gotten the most attention, and if that sounds so important, why haven't we heard more about it? Again, that's partly by design. That's why I think the committee did a good job in the report of laying out the stuff that's not quite as headline grabbing. Why haven't we heard more about this? Well, here's why.
Welcome to Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
The first rule of Coup Club is you don't talk about it, like any secret endeavor that could fall apart even if just exposed. The report shows that Trump's plan to go to the Capitol, which I've emphasized to you tonight in the quotes I've read, it had to stay secret because it wasn't just a plan to show up at the Capitol. Again, if the plan was just to show up, wave, give one more speech, and then walk away, why would that need to be a secret? No. What is compelling about this, what makes it look guilty, is that it was not just legal. It was a secret plan to advance a criminal plot. And then to fake a contested election, try to force it to the House vote, as we've explained, that mishugas, to use a legal term of art. Now, the report shows Coup Club kept the endgame secret. Most Trump fans who risked it all to storm the Capitol did not know about the nature of the way they wanted to stage a contested election or use voter fraud and elector fraud to claim it was contested and then try to have a House vote. So the committee refers these folks for indictment on the idea that if there are no consequences for the people on your screen, whether they were president or not, whether they were in the DOJ or not, like Mr. Clark, whether they're lawyers or not, like Mr. Eastman and Giuliani, whatever they once were, they are citizens today. They are human beings in our society. And if they don't face any consequences whatsoever, none of them, then Team Coup might learn the lesson that, sure, there were some consequences. I don't want to minimize them because those prosecutions are real. We've reported on them. The sedition trial is a big deal. But what I am telling you here is the bloodless part of the coup. If they learn that maybe that's not a big deal because this time it failed, but nobody on that screen went to jail, then that risks turning the failed coup into a practice session. The committee is finishing its work with this exhaustive, meticulous pile of evidence and handing it to the Attorney General. Literally, the DOJ has started taking in these files, and we know they asked for them. And the committee is basically saying to Attorney General Garland, don't you see what's here? Yes, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, as I've told you, because she personifies a kind of a judge, weighing the evidence on the scale without fear or favor of the people involved. But Merrick Garland is supposed to be able to see, to lead the prosecutors who get the factual evidence and put it on that actual scale. And you have to see the facts to do that. If you can't see some of these facts I've just shared, plus the other 800 plus pages, if you can't see that in the light of day, then there won't be any time where the proverbial Lady Justice is judging the plotters. And that's the thing. We talk about the rule of law. We talk about independence. We talk about how long it takes to develop these kind of cases. But there is a big difference between being thoughtful and being patient and ignoring what appears to be emerging, which is, and I'll say it clearly as we start the year, a disturbing double standard in Merrick Garland's Justice Department, where the lawyers and the connected and the powerful and the people who worked at DOJ, oh, how funny, they all work together, are somehow being held to a different, lower standard, being coddled legally than the people who rushed the Capitol. I don't say that with any book of business for whether you indict Donald Trump or not. There may be reasons, legal, prudential, and otherwise, why going that line is too difficult, and good faith, nonpartisan prosecutors don't do it. Take the former president out and look at that other list of lawyers and ask yourself, why is it so hard for the DOJ to indict lawyers? Is there bias at play? Is there a lack of independence? Is there fear? These are tough questions, especially for people who want to assume the best. We're not doing assumptions here. We're doing reporting. And the legal reporting bears out a crime spree that is being charged in different ways for different people. I can't prove to you why, but I can show you the receipts.
It is Tuesday, the 3rd of January of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika, or Spanish paprika, will make all the difference in the world. You know it always has, and it always will, because that's how the spice trade works, and we like to keep it spicy here. And how are you in your spice-filled life on this fabulous Tuesday, the first day of the new Congress? Yeah, it looks like the, I like to call them now, since Daily Kos says we can't call them maggots, I like to call them MAGA Nazis, because it kind of rolls off the tongue better than MAGA fascists. But maybe MAGA fascists is a much more correct description of who they are. Though I actually think that they tend more towards the Nazi goose-stepping aspect of what fascism is. So anyway, they look like they're having a bit of a problem with picking a leader. Because if you have a choice between, I don't know, a bucket of snakes and an empty suit, they're having a hard time choosing. They really are. They really are. And good for them. It just shows that they are just disruptors. They don't know how to govern, and they don't care. Government means, I don't know what government means to them. I guess I was naive my whole life. I've had this romantic notion about what a representative democracy meant and what our function in that representative democracy is. We, the people. And I guess everybody just got so isolated, and this idea of rugged individualism, they're all plugged in to, the media. The little box, the blue box. And here we are. So I would like to see a survey of people who were absolutely enamored with The Apprentice. Because I got to tell you, I don't think I saw one whole episode of that thing. I think it came on while I was looking for something else to watch. You know, back in the day, you had to scroll through. You know, you couldn't just like pick a channel. Sometimes you had to scroll through, and I came across it. You know, I'm just looking for something to watch, and it had Trump on it. And right then, I was like, why would anyone want to build up, I don't know, a TV production around Donald Trump? My God, how much did he pay to get in? And then I'm finding out that he was getting paid big bucks. Well, that's how he works, you know, licensing the name. So I'd like to see a survey of those who were absolutely enamored with The Apprentice, and now, you know, how many of those people are Q adherents? MAGA Qs. Just wondering, because maybe there was something in the signal that caused them to have their, I don't know, the lizard brain part of their brain. Yeah, where is that? Is that where the hypothalamus is? Maybe. Anyway, it tickled that, and now look where we are. I mean, it's just absolute mob insanity. And you can take that both as a mob of like an unruly mob of people of, I don't know, some number of crazy people, lots, a nation full, or, you know, the organized mob. Got to be a little crazy for that too. All right, well, we had somewhat of a disruptive morning here. Yeah, but we won't get into it too much. Kind of delayed things I expected to have done at a certain point, and we're a little bit behind. So why don't we, instead of going on to a big rant, and I know I should mention something about Hamlin, the football player for the Buffalo Bills who got hurt, well, had a heart attack, you know, laid on a hit, and had his heart skip a beat, as we used to say back in the day, and they had to put a defib on him to shock him back into, hopefully he has a regular heart rhythm. Still in critical condition, though, you know, hearing that means that there's something positive to look at. The big question now is oxygenated blood to the brain. Was there much of a delay of that? And what damage and debilitating physical aspects of that will transpire when he comes to? And I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that he comes to, because these things, I don't know. So, of course, you know, Charlie Kirk and others immediately jumped on the old bandwagon and said they're dropping like flies, which is code for he was vaccinated. And all these, like, just stellar athletes are just falling over dead. Well, they're not. They're not having cardiac arrest because of, you know, being vaccinated. It's ludicrous for them to bring this up. But, you know, they're doing Vlad's work. And I'll remind folks once again, this is not hyperbole. This is not me joking. This isn't me not going off the deep end. This is codified by our own intel. And you don't need to even have the intel to know that it's happening. You can mark it. on a calendar when these things really began to take off. And you can see where the idea of it was floated for a few, I don't know, years, if a decade or more. And that is the influence of Vlad and his mob government of Russia to destabilize the United States of America or anybody else who gets in their way, because it's not just us that is happening to. Because there's other actors that like to have a destabilized world so that they can, I don't know what, become rich warlords? I suppose that's what it is. Okay, I didn't mean to go off on that, but it was just astounding how quickly taking the tragedy of this poor kid, and he's 24 years old, I'm sorry, he's going to be a kid to me, okay? Maybe even to you too, we are of a certain age. If we have to suffer ageism, well, then I get to call a 24-year-old a kid. And I only say that because when I think about when I was 24, I was on top of the world, but I was still a kid. Yep. Okay. Well, I was still a man. I took the responsibility of manhood. But, you know, at 24, 25, you're still kind of a kid. Especially in today's new go-go society. Anyway. It was just, I don't know, just brought up a lot of stuff because, as you know, this time of year, it's really rough. Which reminds me, Modest Mouse drummer died at the age of 45 of cancer. Around my son's age, or would be. And that's why this time of year is rough. So, you know, somebody passing that's close to my son's age, you know, 45 or so, would be around what my son would be now. And then this 24-year-old kid, you know, at the pinnacle right now of his life, you know, in terms of physicality and being able to couple a desire with making money. You know, that's always something that's kind of nice, you know. It's almost like an American thing. And then to have it cut so short that way from an innocuous hit. And it can happen. I've seen, I mentioned this on Kegra Show. I Skyped him while I was listening to the show for a bit. That I saw a kid on an opposing team in high school go into cardiac arrest from getting a helmet to the chest right there around the sternum area. And even David brought up, you know, in martial arts, you know, there is a move with the heel of the hand where you hit right there at the sternum and you can make your opponent have their heart skip a beat, as one used to say back in the day. Now it's an electrical disruption, and it is. It skips a beat. Some people are able to get that beat going back, and some people it's you know, they're in a paralyzing reflex, and I don't know. I have no scientific evidence that that's the case, but the body is what it is, and the muscles generate electricity, and I don't know if they're in a locked-in point. Who knows? Anyway, hopefully the kid is on the road to full recovery, and maybe he might be able to play again, but is it that important anymore? Hopefully he has enough money socked away. He's only played for 2 years, damn it. I don't know if he's vetted to be able to get the kinds of money that you need from the players union to be able to have your care taken care of. But I think that if any of that comes to that, there will be an outpouring of support from him, from fellow teammates and players across the league, and probably athletes in general, as well as we the people. Okay, let us now get into what we have in store for you here as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Louisiana authorities' use of facial recognition technology led to the mistaken identity arrest of a Georgia man on a fugitive warrant. Oh, did I mention that the suspect is black? The Supreme Court is taking longer to hear cases. Yeah, this MAGA court, they're throwing all tradition out the window. Actually, in some ways, they're going back to the old tradition. And we'll get into that article. And the Washington Commanders owner, Dan Snyder, in a recent court filing called England his usual residence. Well, that's nice to know, since he's trying to sell his interest in the Commanders because he is such a despicable human being they don't want him to be an owner anymore. Good riddance. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where scuffles broke out just outside a village in western Germany that is to be razed to allow the expansion of a coal mine. Yeah. Well, good thing. And Mexico's Supreme Court elected the first woman Chief Justice in its history. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link right there by the social media scroll, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It really does help us pay our bills. And I'll let Tom tell you the particulars on how you might be able to do that. But it is your generosity that has allowed us really to fulfill our civic duty here at Netroots Radio all these many, many years. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio, that's right, on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. While Twitter still exists as we know it, we have moved to Mastodon, so you can also find us at Mastodon there, Netroots Radio. Once again, I'm bereft in getting the actual link and Addy so that you know it here, but you can find it on the links provided. And Tom takes care of those accounts, and we thank you, Tom, for doing so, and everything else that you and Kelly do. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And that's where you can find all the links that I've been telling you that we have, especially the links to the articles that we are, well, in our little salon news read that we do here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. So do follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And they're everywhere. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe is from the Associated Press and by staff thereof. Louisiana authorities' use of facial recognition technology led to the mistaken identity arrest of a Georgia man on a fugitive warrant, an attorney said, in a case that renews attention to racial disparities and the use of the digital tool. Randall Reed, age 28, was jailed in late November in DeKalb County, Georgia. Or was that DeKalb? And the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate reported his attorney, Tommy Calagero, said authorities erroneously linked Reed to purse thefts in Jefferson Parish and Baton Rouge. Reed was arrested on November 25th and was released on the 1st of December. Reed is black, and his arrest brings new attention to the use of a technology critics say results in a higher rate of misidentification of people of color than of white people. They told me I had a warrant out of Jefferson Parish. I said, "What is Jefferson Parish?" Reed said. "I have never been to Louisiana a day in my life." Then they told me it was for theft. So not only have I not been to Louisiana, I also don't steal. Calagero said Reed was falsely linked to the June theft of luxury purses from a consignment shop in Monterey, a New Orleans suburb in Jefferson Parish. I hope I pronounced that correctly. A Baton Rouge Police Department detective then adopted the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office's identification of Reed to secure an arrest warrant, alleging he was among 3 men involved in another luxury purse theft the same week. Court records show, according to the newspaper. Differences, such as a mole on Reed's face, prompted the Jefferson sheriff to rescind the warrant, his lawyer said, who estimated a 40-pound difference between Reed and the purse thief in surveillance footage may have also had something to do with it, too. Now, Jefferson Sheriff Joe Lopinto's office did not respond to several requests for information on Reed's arrest and release and the agency's use of facial recognition or any safeguards around it. The agency did not immediately respond to a request by the AP as well. Reed's case brings renewed attention to the use of facial recognition tools in Louisiana and elsewhere. Facial recognition systems have faced criticism because of their mass surveillance capabilities, which raises privacy concerns, and because some studies have shown that the technology is far more likely to misidentify black and other people of color than white people, which has resulted in mistaken arrests. Police in New Orleans say facial recognition can be used only to generate leads, and that officers must get approval from department officials before lodging a request through the Louisiana State Analytic and Fusion Exchange in Baton Rouge. You know, the old fusion centers. Under the latest city rules, all possible matches must undergo a peer review by other facial recognition investigators. Legislation to restrict the use of facial recognition statewide died in a 2021 legislative session. Jessica Gresco of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. When lawyers argue before the Supreme Court, a small white light goes on to tell them when their time is almost expired, and then a red light signals when they should stop. But arguments this term are extending well beyond the red light's cue. Arguments that usually lasted an hour in the morning have stretched well beyond 2, and on many days it's long past lunchtime before the court breaks. The lengthy arguments have to do with a change the justices have made to their argument style, a switch tied to the coronavirus pandemic, leading to the justices asking more questions. Justices have said in the past that lawyers' written briefs, not oral arguments, most influence their decisions. So it's unclear if the extra time is really helping them decide cases. Whether that trend will continue is also an open question. In December, an argument about whether a Colorado graphic artist can refuse to create wedding websites for same-sex couples lasted 2 hours and 25 minutes, and an important election case that is scheduled for an hour and a half clocked in at 2 hours and 53 minutes. Already, a handful of arguments have been longer than any argument in the High Court that the High Court heard in the term that ended in June, and that term included major cases on abortion and guns. In the graphic artist case on December 5th, Gorsuch engaged in friendly banter with attorneys about the length of arguments. "Good morning, Mr. Olson," Gorsuch said around 11:30 a.m. after arguments had been going on for nearly an hour and a half. "Is it still morning?" responded Colorado lawyer Eric R. Olson. "Just barely," Gorsuch replied to laughter from the audience. It must not feel like it standing where you are. I'm here all day, Justice Gorsuch, Olson said. The reason high court arguments are running longer goes back to a change the justices made in 2020. After the pandemic began, the justices decided to hold arguments by telephone and abandoned their typical free-for-all style of questioning. Instead, each justice got a few minutes to ask questions in order of seniority. When the justices moved back to in-person arguments in their courtroom more than a year and a half later, they returned to the larger free-for-all questioning. Now, however, at the end of each lawyer's time, the justices each get a chance to ask any remaining questions again in seniority order. That switch led to an average of 18 extra minutes per case last term, said lawyer William J., who has been tracking the extra time. The justices' new format has tripped up some lawyers who are used to the old way of doing business and have moved to sit down when the red light on their podium went on. Don't go, not so fast, Chief Justice John Roberts told one lawyer who tried to sit prematurely. Longer arguments are in fact a return for the court. Early in the court's history, cases could take days to argue. During the 1800s, when the justices heard arguments from noon to 4 p.m. without a lunch break, tables were set up behind the bench, and the justices would leave one or two at a time to eat. The audience could not see them eating, but they could very distinctly hear the rattle of knives and forks, court history expert Claire Cushman has written. The length of argument shrank over the years until in 1970, under Chief Justice Warren Burger, it became 30 minutes per side. The court's website claims that's still the case. Typically, the court holds 2 arguments each day, beginning at 10 a.m., each lasting 1 hour, it says. These days, there's no leaving the bench to eat during arguments, though justices sometimes duck out to go to the bathroom. In October, when the court heard back-to-back arguments in 2 affirmative action cases, it took a brief break between the cases. The court had scheduled 2 hours and 40 minutes of arguments in the 2 that took nearly 5 hours. Javala, Liz Clark, and Mark Maskey of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Less than 2 months ago, when Washington Commanders owner Daniel Snyder was asked for the country or state in which he is usually a resident in a public filing, the native and longtime resident of the D.C. area provided a somewhat unusual answer: England. The certificate of incorporation of a private limited company for Snyder, UK Investments Limited, was filed on November 21st with the Registrar of Companies for England and Wales. Snyder and his wife, Tanya, or is it Tanya, the co-CEO of the Commanders, are listed as company directors. For both, the country or state of which they are usually a resident is listed as England. Snyder, who grew up in Maryland's Montgomery County and graduated from high school in Rockville before attending the University of Maryland, had made his primary home in Potomac since 2001 before purchasing another home in Virginia in November of 2021. While the NFL does not require that a team owner reside in the United States, The filing could signal the Snyders' intentions as they consider offers for all or part of the commanders. The application to register a company in the UK was dated 19 days after the November 2nd announcement by the commanders that the Snyders had hired an investment bank to consider potential transactions related to the team. It was not immediately clear whether the Snyders' London-based company had been used to purchase property or for any other purposes to this point. A person with knowledge of the matter said the Snyder family long has held property in England. Snyder's late father had dual citizenship. That person declined to say whether London will be the Snyders' primary residence. The commanders also declined to comment. Okay, well, hopefully good riddance. And now that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Ever notice that some music just really makes you want to dance? Well, a new study shows that it is, indeed, all about the bass. Because researchers have found that during a concert, boosting the bass bumps up the boogieing. The results appear in the journal Current Biology.
Music and musical rhythm have been kind of fascinating to me for a long time, since I was a kid. And in particular, the way that they make us feel.
Daniel Cameron is a postdoctoral fellow at McMaster University. He also plays drums.
As a drummer, you're interested in making the crowd want to move and feel good and give a good, pleasurable time feel. And this is related to the work I do in science.
Cameron and his colleagues want to understand how music can engender an almost irrepressible urge to feel our bodies in motion.
And we knew from anecdotal evidence and other experimental evidence that there was an association between bass and dancing.
So people who enjoy electronic dance music, or EDM, report that the thrumming bass produces a sensation that makes them want to move. And some studies have shown that our movements are more fine-tuned when we're locked onto bass notes.
So for example, if you have people tap along to a sequence of tones, their tapping is slightly more accurate. They're more synchronized when those tones are low in frequency compared to high in frequency.
So the researchers set out to determine,
if you add more bass to music, will it cause more dancing?
Now, they didn't want to manipulate the bass line in a way that was obvious, because then people might consciously decide to step up their stepping out.
That might be interesting.
But it would also muddy the results, like if someone in a drug trial knows they're getting the real deal and not a placebo.
So we wanted to do a subtle manipulation, a very consciously undetectable manipulation.
So they broke out a set of very, very low-frequency speakers.
These are specialized speakers, kind of like subwoofers. People might have subwoofers as part of their stereo system, and these are speakers that play even lower frequencies than most systems are able to do. Even lower frequencies than we think are typically able to be heard.
With their special speakers set up, the researchers staged a concert.
We had the electronic music duo Orphix come to our live lab.
That's live, L-I-V-E, for Large Interactive Virtual Environment. It's like a cross between a performance space and a laboratory.
The people who came to the show were fans of the group. They wanted to come and see EDM. They wanted to dance. And while they were there, we asked if they wanted to volunteer in our experiment. And a good number of people signed up.
Recruits adorned themselves with headbands bearing motion capture reflectors, which the researchers used to track their movements.
And then what we did was just, during the concert, turn these very low-frequency speakers on and leave them on for 2.5 minutes, Turn them off. Leave them off for 2.5 minutes. Back on for 2.5 minutes, off for 2.5 minutes. On, off throughout the concert.
Now, you can't hear when the speakers are switched on. And based on the surveys filled out after the show, and a follow-up study of the manipulated audio clips, neither could the concert-goers. But their feet sure knew something was up.
And what we found was, by looking at the motion capture data, people just moved more. They covered more ground, they moved faster when the low-frequency speakers were on. So this tells us that the extra bass, these very, very low frequencies, cause more moving.
About 12% more moving and grooving. So the concert and the experiment were a success. And best of all,
people enjoyed the concert, and the more people moved, the more they enjoyed the concert.
Which shouldn't be a surprise.
Dancing and pleasure really go hand in hand together. It's something we like to do with music. It's a pleasurable response, and we show with this work that bass is part of that mix.
Next up, Cameron says he'd like to look at whether bass can help bring us together.
So people are more likely to feel good about one another and help one another if they've had some experience synchronizing their movements together. And dance is a great, fun way to do this. And this might be related to why we find dance in all cultures and throughout history for the human species. It's a fundamental part of being human.
So, to cut down on conflict, maybe just crank up the bass and cut up the dance floor. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkins.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
James Whitey Bulger, an organized crime kingpin in Boston for decades, extorted, tortured, and murdered people.
I'm criminal defense attorney Luke Ryan, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
After an FBI agent gave Bulger a heads up about his imminent indictment in 1994, Bulger skipped town and lived on the lam until his arrest in 2011, after which he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 2 life terms plus 5 years. Bulger's FBI handler helped him because Bulger also was an FBI informant. And in prison, informants can be in deep trouble. Indeed, when Bulger was transferred to the Hazleton, West Virginia Penitentiary in 2018, where known enemies of his were doing time, inmates placed bets on how long he would survive, which wasn't long. Within hours of his arrival, he was bludgeoned to death. The recent Inspector General's report says that Bulger, who is a frail 89-year-old in a wheelchair, should never have been transferred to that prison and never placed in general population there. Never, not even close. Prison authorities knew that Bulger, an obviously in many ways atypical inmate, would receive enormous publicity if something happened to him. Which raises the bigger question: how much attention do we pay to the safety and health of the not famous more than 2 million people locked up in American prisons and jails today?
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because, as the criminal legal system proves every day, freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day the trial against labor leader Tom Mooney began. Mooney stood accused of detonating a bomb at the Preparedness Day parade in San Francisco on July 22, 1916. The military parade was meant to demonstrate U.S. preparedness to enter World War I. Many labor leaders objected to the idea of the United States becoming involved in the war. The bomb in San Francisco killed 10 spectators and injured 40 others. District Attorney Charles Fickert soon charged Mooney, his wife Rena, and his assistant Warren Billing with the crime. Mooney, born in Chicago, was the son of a coal miner. He became an iron molder at the age of 14, where he joined the union. Known for his socialist politics, Mooney was involved in a long, bitter strike against the Pacific Gas and Electric Company in 1913 that spanned well into 1914. He was accused of trying to use dynamite during that strike, but was acquitted. After the explosion at the San Francisco parade, Martin Swanson, a private detective with the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, pointed the district attorney toward Mooney. There was no evidence tying Billings or Mooney to the explosion. During the trial, some who testified against Mooney even admitted to committing perjury on the stand. Despite all of this, the men were convicted. Billings received life in prison, while Mooney was sentenced to hang. The trial garnered international outrage. President Woodrow Wilson set up a commission to study the case. Mooney's sentence was commuted to life in prison. For 2 decades, a fight was waged to release Mooney. Finally, the evidence of false testimony piled so high it could not be ignored. And in 1939, Billings and Mooney were released from prison. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 37 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs nearly the same as yesterday, about 41 to 42. We are under foggy and drizzly conditions at the moment, with considerable cloudiness in the offing and occasional rain showers bringing with it about a quarter inch of rain. Winds light and variable. Cloudy tonight with lows in the mid-30s. Winds light and variable. Could be drizzly conditions tonight as well. And then cloudy with rain tomorrow, slackening off in the afternoon. Highs going up to the low 50s. Winds will be out of the east-southeast at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And it looks like a lot more rain coming in for the rest of the week. Pollen is rated as none outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 21 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.92 inches. Visibility is at a half mile, and relative humidity is at 95%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 52 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 49 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 60 and fair. Kyiv is 46 and cloudy. Kabul is 25 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 61 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 39 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 45 degrees cloudy with a flood watch. And New York, New York is 50 degrees Fahrenheit with rain. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Scuffles broke out yesterday, Monday, outside a village in western Germany that is to be razed to allow the expansion of a coal mine, a plan that is drawing resistance from climate activists. Activists threw fireworks, bottles, and stones at police outside the village of Lützerath before the situation calmed down and officers pulled back. Protesters previously had set up a burning barricade, and one glued his hand to the access road. The hamlet is to be demolished to expand the Garzweiler lignite mine, despite protests from environmentalists who fear millions more tons of heat-trapping carbon dioxide will be released into the atmosphere. Activists have been living in houses abandoned by former residents. The Heinsberg County Administration has issued an order barring people from Lützerath, and if they fail to leave, authorizing police to clear the village from January 10th onward. Officials have called for a nonviolent end to the activist occupation. In October, the federal and regional governments, both of which include the environmentalist Green Party and energy company RWE, agreed to bring forward the exit from coal use in the region by 8 years to 2030. But amid concerns about Germany's energy security following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the agreement also foresees the life of 2 power plant units that were supposed to be switched off earlier being extended until at least 2024, and Lützerath being razed to enable further mining. But amid concerns about Germany's energy security following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the agreement also foresees the life of 2 power plant units that were supposed to be switched off earlier being extended until at least 2024, and Lützerath being razed to enable further mining.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more Associated Press staff brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Mexico's Supreme Court elected the first woman Chief Justice in its history yesterday, Monday. Justice Norma Lucia Pina was sworn in for her 4-year term at the head of the 11-member court, pledging to maintain the independence of the country's highest court. Judicial independence is indispensable in resolving conflicts between the branches of government, Pena said Monday in laying out her plans. My main proposal is to work to build majorities, leaving aside my personal vision. As Chief Justice, Pena will also head the entire judicial branch. She is not considered an ally of President Obrador, and opposition parties welcomed her election. The 6-5 vote by her fellow ministers yesterday came despite pressure by Obrador on the ministers. Lopez Obrador had backed another female justice, and that should be woman, AP, Yasmin Esquivel, for the top post, but indications emerged recently that Justice Esquivel may have plagiarized an academic paper to get her bachelor's degree in the late 80s. The public university where she got that degree is still studying the case. Her thesis, presented in 1987, was identical to one presented a year earlier. Esquivel claimed the earlier thesis copied her later work. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.